The envelope sat in the center of the mahogany table. Dried blood crusted the corner of the paper. One name was written across the front in shaky handwriting. Dorian Vance. Nobody in the room recognized it. Nobody except the lawyer. His hands trembled as he set it down. "This changes everything," he said. 3 relatives leaned forward. Diane Vance Marsh gripped her wine glass so hard her knuckles went white. "Whose blood is that?" she whispered. The lawyer didn't answer. He slid the envelope toward a woman standing near the door. A woman in a gray maid's uniform. A woman nobody had bothered to look at twice in 15 years. He wants her to open it first. The maid's name was Colleen Briggs. She had worked in the Vance house for 15 years, and in 15 years, nobody had ever asked her to sit at that table. She sat now. Her hands shook as she reached for the envelope. "Wait!" Diane Vance Marsh shot up from her chair. "Before some housekeeper touches a family document, I want to know why my late uncle's blood is on it." The lawyer, a thin man named Harold Pruitt, adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Vance mailed this envelope to my office 3 days before he died. He gave explicit instructions. It opens in front of the family. All of the family." "She's not family," Diane snapped. Colleen said nothing. She had learned, a long time ago, that silence kept her employed. Diane's brother, Preston Vance, leaned back with a smirk. He wore a suit that cost more than Colleen made in 2 months. "Let her open it. Whatever's inside doesn't change who inherits. The will already names us." "Does it?" Harold asked quietly. The room went still. Preston's smirk faded half an inch. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," Harold said, "that your uncle amended his will 4 days before he died. The envelope contains the only copy of that amendment. He didn't trust me to keep it in the office safe. He didn't trust either of you. He mailed it to himself, then had it delivered here today, on this exact date, at this exact hour." Diane's wineglass hit the table harder than she meant it to. "That's insane. He was sick, medicated. That amendment isn't valid." "He was of sound mind," Harold said. "I have the notarization. I have 2 independent witnesses, and I have this." He nodded at the envelope, still sitting untouched in Colleen's hands. Colleen looked down at her own fingers. She hadn't noticed she was gripping it so tightly her nails had gone white against the paper. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why does he want me to open it?" Nobody answered. Preston stood now too, circling behind his sister's chair, his eyes locked on the envelope like he could burn through it with sheer will. "I think we should call our own lawyer before anyone opens anything." "Your uncle anticipated that," Harold said. He included a clause. "If any beneficiary attempts to delay, obstruct, or contest the reading before it happens, they forfeit their claim immediately. No hearing, no appeal." Diane's face drained of color. Preston's jaw locked so tight a muscle jumped near his ear. Colleen still hadn't moved. Her thumb hovered over the wax seal, and something about the blood on the corner made her hesitate. Just she recognized the smear now. It wasn't just blood. It was shaped like a fingerprint. And it wasn't Dorian Vance's. Colleen broke the seal. The paper inside was thin, official, stamped by a notary. She unfolded it with trembling hands and began to read aloud, because Harold nodded at her too. "I, Dorian Vance, being of sound mind, revoke all prior distributions to Diane Vance Marsh and Preston Vance, effective immediately, on the grounds of attempted fraud against my estate discovered on the 14th of March. Diane's glass shattered on the floor. "That's a lie," she said. "That's a—" "Let her finish," Harold said. Colleen's voice wavered, but she kept reading. "3 months ago, my nephew Preston forged my signature on a transfer of my Millbrook Avenue properties, valued at $4 million, into a shell company controlled by his sister. I have the notarized proof from my private investigator, whom I hired after noticing the discrepancy in my March bank statement." Preston's face had gone the color of ash. "I also discovered," Colleen continued, "that the fall I took on my staircase in February, which my doctors called an accident, was not. My housekeeper, Colleen Briggs, was the only person who insisted on calling an ambulance instead of waiting, as my niece suggested, to see if I would improve. Colleen saved my life that night. My family stood in the hallway and did nothing." Quint. The room went dead silent. "That's not what happened," Diane said. but her voice had lost its edge. It cracked halfway through the sentence. "I have the 911 call log," Harold said. "Time-stamped. Colleen called 11 minutes before anyone else in that house said a word." Colleen stared at the page, her own name staring back at her from a dying man's handwriting. "Therefore," she read, barely audible now, "I leave the entirety of my estate, including all properties, accounts, and holdings, to Colleen Briggs, the only person in this house who ever treated me like a human being instead of a bank account." Preston lunged for the paper. Harold stepped in front of Colleen so fast his chair toppled backward. "Touch that document, and I call the detective waiting in my car outside. He's been waiting for my signal since you two walked in." Preston froze mid-reach. "Detective," Diane repeated, the word barely making it out of her mouth. "Fraud is a felony in this state," Harold said. "So is attempted manslaughter. If the DA decides your uncle's fall wasn't as accidental as you claimed, I'd sit down." Preston sat. So did Diane, her whole body shaking now, the fury drained out of her and replaced with something closer to fear. Colleen looked at the blood on the envelope again, the fingerprint. She understood now. It wasn't Dorian's blood. It was Preston's, from the night he'd cut his hand forging that signature and left a single red smear on the corner of the envelope Dorian had kept, for months, as evidence. Dorian Vance had known exactly who to blame, and exactly who to protect. The front door opened. 2 officers stepped into the foyer, badges out, eyes already on Preston Vance. "Preston Vance," one of them said. "We need you to come with us." Diane didn't move. She just stared at Colleen, at the woman she'd never once looked at directly in 15 years, now holding the deed to everything Diane had ever wanted. 3 months passed before Colleen stepped foot in the Vance mansion again as its owner. She hadn't wanted the parties, the reporters, or the lawyers circling with offers to help manage her new estate. She'd asked for one thing first, to visit Dorian's grave alone. She stood there now, a bouquet of white lilies in her hands, the ones he used to ask her to cut from the garden every Sunday. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "I would have stayed anyway. I would have called that ambulance 100 times over." The wind moved through the cemetery trees, and for a moment, she swore she could hear him laugh the way he used to when she'd scold him for skipping his medication. Preston's trial had ended 2 weeks earlier. Forgery, attempted fraud, and a manslaughter charge that hadn't fully stuck, but had cost him everything anyway. 12 years, the judge said. Diane hadn't been charged, but the fraud case had frozen every account to her name, and the last Colleen heard, she was renting a studio apartment across town and telling anyone who'd listen that she'd been framed by a maid. Colleen never responded to any of it. She didn't need to. Back at the house, she'd kept most of the staff on, given every one of them a raise, and turned the East Wing into a scholarship fund for kids aging out of foster care, the way Dorian had once quietly done for her 20 years ago, before she'd ever worked a day in his home. Harold visited sometimes, mostly to check on paperwork, but mostly, she suspected, because he didn't like the idea of her rattling around that big house with no one to talk to. "You know," he told her one afternoon, watching her replant the same lilies Dorian used to grow, "he told me once, you were the only person he trusted with anything real." I didn't understand what he meant until that day at the table. Colleen smiled, brushing dirt from her hands. "He didn't trust me with money. He trusted me to notice when somebody needed help." Harold nodded slowly. Funny how that turned out to be worth more. That evening, Colleen sat on the porch steps, where she used to eat her lunch alone during breaks, back when she was staff and not the woman who owned the house behind her. She looked up at the windows glowing gold in the dark. For the first time in 15 years, she didn't feel like a guest in someone else's life. She felt like she was finally home.